if you're a writer or a patron of the arts and you just want to rub elbows and meet authors and maybe be inspired, I mean, these are very worthwhile events and very well received.
Oh, there's a place for every journey where broken voices arise and build a home for hearts and storytellers called the Life Journeys Writers Guild. They lift the young, they lift the weary, they help the hidden stories flow. They bring together every culture and help our inner spirits grow. From every walk of life they come, every faith, every age, every dream. 'Cause the guild believes in lifting people and making every soul feel seen from sea.
Yellow Molly, aka Molly Yellow, short for mulatto. Recipe for yellow dye: make a strong decoction of hickory bark chips. Strain, mix in sulfur, boil clove until the color pleases. Whom does my color please? Did love die or ever live on the palette where I was made? Who dyed me a telltale ochre? How to explain me or yellow Harry, not to be confused with black Harry? My paternity is no mystery. My only surname, a euphemism, child of the plantation, meaning my mama was enslaved and my pa was white. Their union was either a sin, if the white preacher is to be trusted, or a crime, at least under criminal law. Marriage between white women and free Negro or mulatto men is forbidden. Any white man that shall intermarry with any Negro or mulatto woman, such Negro or mulatto shall become a slave during life, excepting mulattoes born of white women who for such intermarriage shall only become servants for 7 years. I never got to ask my mom about my pa because she was sold south before I could string words into a question, before her face couldn't print in my memory. Folks say that my mistress banished her and forbade me from darkening the door. Under the hot sun, I turned rusted and blistered. Neither my name nor my complexion was of my choosing. Yellow brings no favor, only unwanted advances from white men who pleasure themselves at my expense. Once, one of them sucked me a lemon from the hothouse. As I tasted the tang, he told me that Molly, in Hebrew, means better. I suppose the name suits me.
I'm Toni Williams Miller, and my poem is The Choice. Sarah Covington Lloyd, 1683 to 1755, wife of Edward Lloyd II. My father first made a name for himself stealing cheese. Once an indentured servant, he went on to own 5 plantations: Covington's Vineyard, Comfort, and Chance, and Collins Adventure, and Snow Hill. Though Quakers, we owned black people and willed them to our sons and daughters, to my sister Priscilla, 2, and to my son Philemon, 1 girl. We passed down wealth in 3 ways: land, silver, and the enslaved. I first met Major General Edward Lloyd II at the Great Meeting House in Greenhaven, Anglican. Edward later said he and his brother Philemon had vied for me as if a trophy from the hunt. Edward won. As his wife, I am the mistress of Y House, and 200s we hold in bondage. I strive to treat them fairly but firmly. I hear some Quakers now condemn slavery. It offends the golden rule they warn. My husband's and my father's faiths collide. I dare not challenge either. Dear Lord, I can only question my own soul. So I was going to make a comment about that poem. To me, It felt like she was in conflict with her station in life currently versus her historical place in society. I don't know about you, but in my opinion, I think she was uncomfortable with where she was in her current beliefs. I think she struggled internally. I hope she did.
My name is Gloria Walters Flowers. I'm told I'm supposed to introduce myself, and that threw me for a loop. I would simply say that I am an aspiring writer. This poem is called Prissy. Prissy is the daughter of Nanny and Isaac Copper, and she's the older sister of Marina. And I would say that there's a little sass, a little proudness, and a little cunning with her. Prissy, house servant, born 1788, daughter of Isaac and Nanny Copper. Since I was old enough to reach a table, I worked in the great house with my folks. Early on, I could set a table and curtsy in silk dresses that the Colonel Lloyd's daughters tired of and cast aside as out of fashion. I admire my reflection in a gilded looking glass. I am more well-versed in etiquette than some of the guests that I serve. One dinner guest remarks that my name comes from the Bible. The New Testament says he'd like to stay with me, like Paul did with Priscilla in Corinth. Prissy is not short for Priscilla. I want to say Prissy is my whole name. As I serve dessert, the man licks his lips, says he'd like a taste of me. I want to say, you already have. I spit in your soup.
Hello, everybody. I'm Elisa Cruz, and I am a board member with the Life Journey Writers Guild. And it's my pleasure to read the poem, Daphne Irons, born circa 1750, house servant. Ironing is hard, hot work. Silk, cotton, linen, and wool garments. From the Lloyd's mahogany wardrobes, I push the flat iron to smooth wrinkles until linens are as crisp as sails and silks as fluid as the creek. Draping gathers and folds, I admire the fabric's hand, so much suppler than burlap, so much softer than towel linen or the coarse linen of the few garments allotted annually to my people. Within months, our outfits are rags, but that does not strip dignity. My inner fiber, strong as this here iron. I just want to give you a few thoughts about how I received this poem. At first, from the title, I thought Daphne Irons was her last name, and then I kind of received iron as how strong she was. And then I was like, no, it's the act of Daphne ironing. And then I thought about growing up. Well, I was born in 1959, so back then, when I was a young girl, one of 9, it was a chore to dampen your clothes, roll them up, and then lay them out and have that iron and just iron everybody. We even ironed the sheets and the pillowcases, and my mother was real strict about that. And I even remember washing clothes and pushing them through the washer that we had to roll the tumbler to wrinkle it out. So this really hit home about not just ironing, but, cleaning, the straightening out of life, and, even in a branch of family, how ironing from slavery times to present impacts us all. Thank you.
My name is Nicholas Ullman. I'm a local school teacher and historian. I'm here today to read The Land of the Free and the Home of the Enslaved by Francis Scott Key, made famous by writing the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. He was born in Carroll County, Maryland, and died in Baltimore in 1843. He lived his entire life during the period of American slavery. As you'll see here, his legacy is conflicted. When he died in the newspapers, he was called the Negro lawyer, except the word Negro was replaced with a word that was very less suitable for present times. And before I read, on a personal note, I have heard many of my peers, many of which who look like me, comment that slavery was so long ago. Why do people have such a problem with it now? And I know that my distant ancestors also happened to be slaves 3,000 years ago, and we have not forgotten it. We have not forgiven it, and I don't expect anyone else to. When Polly and I married, we did not expect that fame would find us. I would have practiced law in obscurity and been known only as a second-rate poet had I not written the Star-Spangled Banner while viewing the Battle of Fort McHenry from the Baltimore Harbor in 1814. I paired my patriotic lyrics with a melody borrowed from a drinking ditty. Like Polly, I was born into a slaveholding family, bred to look down on African descendants, but I'm of two minds about slavery. On one hand, I enslaved blacks in my household. In my lifetime, I freed 7 of them, including Clem, who I now pay wages to supervise my plantation. I fought against the transatlantic slave trade and volunteered to represent enslaved and free blacks in the courts. And for that, I'm called a friend of men of color. Yet I defended the rights of enslavers to recapture their possessions. I prosecute abolitionists for aiding runaways and for publishing positions that could incite revolts. And I objected to the British offer of freedom to enslaved men who joined their attack on the United States in the War of 1812. Indeed, my anthem proclaimed, "No refuge could save the hireling and the slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." But I did not want to deny the black man freedom. On the contrary, as a founder of the American Colonization Society, I advocated for returning African descendants to Africa. When a case I tried sparked a race riot, I stood at the jail door to stop a lynch mob from hanging an enslaved 18-year-old accused of trying to kill his mistress. The sun shines on me, but behind the curtain of slavery, my views could not be cloudier.
My name is Samuel J. Peter. I'm not going to tell you what the J is because it's Nigerian and it's kind of long, so I'll leave you guys alone. I'm going to be reading Frederick Douglass Remembers His Mother. My first summer at White House. Hunger lodged in my belly like a boarder. I had gotten on Aunt Katie's bad side, and she fed me so poorly that I stole leathery bacon skin, roasted kernels of Indian corn, barely enough for a field mouse, and was ready to fight Nep, the old dog, for the crumbs and small bones flung from tablecloths that servants shook. Just when I thought I'd starve, my mother showed up with a hug and ginger cake. For me, and a warning for Aunt Katie. My mother had walked 12 miles to feed me enough with love to sustain me. I fell asleep knowing that I mattered, that I had a throne in my mother's heart. The next morning, she was gone, and I never saw her again.
You're going to hear a little bit from the author in a little bit, but I wanted to share a story, a personal story. Now, slavery, they didn't have, of course, they didn't have money to do things, and after slavery, money was tight, and one problem was you didn't have money to buy nice linens, and washcloths and dishcloths and things like that. What you did was if the clothes were old, you ripped those up and you used those to wash your dishes. You used those to wash yourself. You couldn't buy nice matching towels like many of us have today. Well, I grew up and my mother was still calling the dishcloth a dish rag. You know, the dish rag. And the washcloth was a wash rag. So I called it that. I never asked. So I'm older. Thank God I can buy the matching towels and the whatever. But I'm in my own house still calling it, get that wash rag. You know, pick up that dishcloth, you know, that dish rag. I'm still using it. So this century, this time, I'm noticing it. And I said, I'm going to make a point to say washcloth and dishcloth, you know, dish towel. I'm going to just say those things, but I didn't explain anything. Sometimes we go through things, but we don't explain our lineage. We don't explain where things come from. And also, I started calling it a washcloth and a dish towel, you know, that kind of thing. Last week, and this hones to the point of, you said, why are we still talking about slavery? Why don't we just forget it? It's in us. No matter where we come from, it's in us. You know, so I think last week or the week before last, I was bathing my youngest grandson, who's 3 years old. He was in the tub with a bubble bath and the bubbles going and having it. And we have a ritual of throwing in all the toys one at a time, that kind of thing. And then I was holding the washcloth, and he said, give me the wash rag. I said, what you call that? And I said, I should have recorded that. He said, I'm ready for the wash rag. Okay, and so that's why we can't forget. So no, we're not only avid readers, but we're also writers. And so we are as interested, Miss Carole, in your journey of writing kin as the stories themselves. So some of us would some of us have heard a couple of your interviews talking about your writing journey and publishing journey, and the thing about she, just like everybody else, has gone through a lot of rejections, and that's part of the game when it comes to publishing. The trick is to not give up. Don't give up. And in one of your interviews, you said, quote, I know my work. So she wasn't going to give up. Because you only need one yes. You may get 100 rejections, but you need that one good yes. So she's had a couple of yeses.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to give you Miss Carole.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me, allowing me to come to your meeting this afternoon. It was really a pleasure to hear the poems read by others, and some of the poems I had never heard read aloud before. So, you know, thank you. Most of them, in fact. Prissy's my favorite, though. Prissy's my favorite. So, of course, I've performed that myself many times. But most of the poems I had never heard read aloud, and so it was quite touching. And thank you for performing today as well. Mm-hmm. So, you want me to talk about my journey first? A little bit about my journey?
Give us a little bit about your journey.
I'm going to try to shrink it down, give it to you in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. You probably have seen the slide of me as a girl. I made it my first poem in first grade, dictated it to my mother on the way home from school. She parked the car, even though we were just 2 blocks from home, and asked me to repeat the poem. And when I said it the second time, she wrote it down, which was a good thing because I couldn't spell all the words. My dad was a high school printing teacher who printed who had his students use some of my early poems as typesetting exercises. That meant that in the early 1960s, before the dawn of the digital technology that we all take for granted today, I got to see my work in print. I did not grow up wanting to be a writer, though. I assumed that the authors of the books that I so loved to read, I was an avid reader, but I assumed that the authors of those books were probably didn't look like me, were dead, all dead, and I had no clue they were getting paid to write the books. So it wasn't until I had made up a poem. I was about to go to graduate school for public administration, and that same the spring before I was supposed to start school, I had submitted a poem that had come to me in a piece. Those of you who are writers know what that means, and it all comes to you at the same time, and you don't revise it, and it's it's done, one and done. So it came to me in a piece, much like that first poem I made up when I was in first grade. And I submitted the poem to a local city magazine, and it got published. And I found out because I picked up the magazine in the dentist office. Yeah, that's how I found out. And they even had it was 3 columns. It'll be probably, I don't know if it's in this presentation. It was 3 columns, and they had mixed the columns up. But my name, and they also didn't have my whole name. It was C.M. Boston. They didn't have my whole name, but it went to my head. And I decided right then and there that I wanted to be an author, that I wanted to be a published author. And 15 years later, I had my first book published. So I was not an overnight success. I was a journalist, and I worked in public relations, and wrote, of course, in that capacity in the D.C. area and in North Carolina. Before happening upon children's literature once I became a mom. And when I became a mother, my own kids reintroduced me to children's literature when we would go to story time at the library and at bookstores, and of course the grandparents were gifting them books, and there were more black faces in those books than there had been in the books that I was accustomed to when I was growing up. I didn't even know I was supposed to have books where the characters looked like me. I just, I love to read, but there weren't many books where the characters looked like me. And I just, I just was happy to have a book to read. But when I saw that when I did a little research and found that the publishing industry was in the midst of a boomlet, a multicultural boomlet it was called at the time, I thought, well, maybe I can write for kids. Prior to that, I was writing poetry and had many poems published in literary journals, and I thought I was writing for adults. But I shifted gears, and my kids were born in '87 and '89, and in 1995, I had my first children's book published, and I never looked back. So I have had a couple poetry chapbooks published for adults, and 1 poetry volume published for adults, and a nonfiction book for adults. But most of what I write is for children, and I view children as the most important audience because their minds are open. And they're forming their opinions and their worldview and their morality and their sense of humanity. And so it's very rewarding for me to write for children. And my career has come full circle because now I collaborate with my son. He illustrated Ken. That's our 3rd book together. And he is also an author. We've co-authored a book called The Roots of Rap. I don't think I brought that one today. And he is a rapper as well, so he's uber talented.
And he's a new daddy too.
He's a new dad. Yeah, he's a new dad. He's my latest. My most recent grandchild is 3.5 months old.
Yes.
Yeah.
That I wanted to talk about just a little bit, and then take some questions about her career or the book or whatever. But we did a couple of workshops, and we listened to your interviews. And if in my invitation, I told you I thought thought her book was like Ken. I thought it was prose poetry. And when I got a chance to ask you, you said, no.
It's just poetry.
It's just poetry.
It's just poetry.
Because I felt like it read like a story as well. There was all that rhythm and everything in it, but I thought I felt stories as well. But
it's narrative poetry.
Okay, narrative
poetry.
All right,
yeah.
that would be the term.
And most of the books I think that I brought most of the books that I brought today are narrative poetry in some respect. I write poetry. My work tends to span various genres, so it's just about all poetry. I may have maybe 5 or 10 books that are prose, maybe just 5, but. It's poetry that's also nonfiction, or that's a biography, or that's historical fiction. And now I'm starting to write contemporary realistic fiction as well.
Contemporary realistic
fiction.
Yeah. Explain.
Well, it's fiction that's set in modern times. It's not about an event that happened a long time ago. Ken might also be considered historical fiction because I had to create stories for the characters. So it's just it's just modern fiction.
Okay.
Modern fiction.
Okay, so in your poetry, like in Ken, you had to create. You weren't there during slavery, so you had to create what we know, what we pull from history, what we know about it, and put it and make it alive with your words.
Right. There were a lot of facts, of course, that I researched, but the archive is limited in terms of African American history, in terms of the history of people of color. So I had to push past the limits of the archive, and I used a method that scholar and MacArthur Genius Fellow Saidiya Hartman, who's a sociologist, calls critical fabulation, meaning that I speculated and I used creative license to cobble these stories together around the facts that I had researched.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's
And I just want to call to your attention, I don't know how many of you are poets, or how many of you are interested in historical narratives or historical fiction, but the unknown fascinates me. And whenever you're working on any historical text, there are unknowns. And one type of poem that I relied on for really, vast unknowns, like where did my people originate from? That was the big question, and I wasn't able to answer it. But I created question poems around that, and the poems probe, and I think as a result, they go really, really deep. I mean, because I'm able to, ask all these questions. Was it this boat? Was it this ship? Did you hear? What did you hear? Did you hear the waves lapping on the ship? Did you see? People thrown overboard, So I ask all these questions and paint a picture around the questions. So don't let the unknown stop you.
Wow. Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit, give a little bit of encouragement about research? Research is hard, but not to give up.
Well, research is easier today than it's ever been because so much has been digitized. Not everything has been digitized, but when I started out doing picture research in the 80s, this is before I was published, early 80s when I was working in D.C., I had to go to the Library of Congress and put on white gloves and have a little stubby pencil, and I had to make an appointment. But now a lot of the prints and the photographs, not the entire collection by any means, but a lot of the collection is digitized. So and I also had to buy the photographs. Now I can just download them and send the publisher the file. So that's picture research, which I really enjoy. But there are library collections that have been digitized about events in history that I've written about, like the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church, the Greensboro sit-ins. Those local libraries have digitized collections of newspapers and other primary sources about those events. So, research is very important. You have to know when to stop and start writing, because you can just keep. It's a rabbit hole. It's a rabbit hole. But if I had to give one bit of advice to any writer, well, one, of course, hone your craft. Don't rush to publication. But if you're submitting, now there are many more opportunities to self-publish today than there were and many more affordable opportunities to self-publish than there were when I was starting out in 1995. But you can't, if you're not self-publishing and you're submitting to publishers, whether they're small presses or mainstream houses in New York, keep something out there. Submit. You can't get published if you do not submit. You can't get published if you don't write. Because many people come to me and say, I have an idea for a book. And I have ideas for books, but an idea is not a book. It's not a manuscript. An idea is ethereal. It's in your brain. It's in the library of your mind. That's it. That's the only place. And you can't check that out. Doesn't circulate. So hone your craft, write, and keep something out there.
Yeah, keep going.
Keep something out there.
All right. One other thing I wanted to mention. We have some artists. Cameron, Ray Chand is a visual artist as well. And your son, I didn't bring my notes, isn't that terrible? The type of artist.
He does
digital-
scratch board.
Yeah,
And,
could you speak on that?
The first couple books were traditional scratch board. He was doing, prior to that, he was doing digital, like photo collages, and we actually had a contract for a book he'd illustrated that way, and then the publisher got eaten up by another publisher, Amazon. And I thought to myself, they're probably not going to want to publish this book of poetry. The book is You Can Fly, the Tuskegee Airmen. So this is traditional scratch board, illustrated with traditional scratch board. But he developed carpal tunnel syndrome because scratch board is repetitive. And I said, what are you going to do? I said, you need to do digital. No, I can't do digital because it's not, he was a purist. It's not fine art. It's not, you won't have a work of fine art. Well, he did, I said, well, you were in such pain. You were complaining to me and, saying I wasn't empathetic enough. And I said, I told you to go to the doctor. But, but I said, so what are you going to do? Because you got these contracts, He said, well, so he tried it and he loved it. He created his own nibs online, on the tablet, on the tablet. Okay. And he was able to work much faster as well. And of course, when anything that's digital rather than analog, you can revise it easier as well. Okay. So he likes it, and he had, as a result, he's had several exhibitions of this work. Oh, that's great. I mean, they're prints, but the museum, the Academy Art Museum in Easton didn't care. Mm-hmm. Okay. The Broward County Public Library didn't care. Yes, your question. Yeah. I write verse novels. I'm a poet, and I'm sticking to it. So I've written. This is a verse novel, and I've written Becoming Billie Holiday. This is my first verse novel for young adults, and I've also written a verse novel about Marilyn Monroe called Beauty Mark. Mm-hmm. It came out in 2020. Not a good year for books to come out. That was, it came out in September 2020. Not a good year, not a good time for books to come out. That was in the throes of COVID. Yeah. Okay. Also, too, we have middle grade, the genre of middle grade books. Yeah. If she's doing a chapter book. Yeah, my agent is really encouraging me to write middle grade. This is supposed to be middle grade, but I think it might be more YA. Yeah. Young adult. Yeah, more YA. But I am working on a verse novel now with my son, a hip-hop novel that is more middle grade. Well, my initial hope was the book was to have a project that I worked on with my son that would get published. And it was actually the brainchild of our agent who said, who asked me, is there a black town that you could write about like Edgar Lee Masters did in Spoon River Anthology? And I said, well, my ancestors founded these two towns on Maryland's Eastern Shore. He said, well, you and Jeffrey should do that. That's a story that only you two could tell. So my objective was to have a vehicle that on which we could collaborate. My hope for the book was, because my son was involved, I wanted it to get recognition, of course. But you're saying what takeaway did I want people to understand? The takeaway came to me after the book was published when we were on our tour to launch the book. And the takeaway is, knowing your history is generational wealth. Mm-hmm. Oh. Mm-hmm. That's right. So, I mean, if you think about it, when we talk about the wealth gap, the racial wealth gap, generally people are referring to, finances, real estate, stocks, bank, money. But African Americans were also stripped of our identity, of our history. And that is a deficit that you cannot make up for. You can't get it back. But once you know it, you can't lose it either. Mm. And it really has been received very well on the Eastern Shore. And across Maryland. When we did the tour, the Maryland Humanities said that we attracted, they weren't crowds per se, but we attracted, our book attracted more people to the events on the tour than any book ever had. Oh, the inanimate objects. I'm not sure how I came to that, except that the house, well, in particular, let me talk about the mirrors, because there's a poem where it talks about where, let me see if I can, I don't know, let me see if I can read part of that, 137. All right, so I went inside the house. It's not the right page. I went inside the house, White House, and toured. It's not a museum, but the current owners let me, come in the house and look around on the first floor, not the second floor. And I realized that many of the knickknacks, they're probably too valuable to be called knickknacks, but they're antiques that were in the place, had been there when my people were in that house, were house servants there. And I always want to make a point that my family was not my ancestors were not solely house servants. Most of them worked in the field, and some of them worked in artisanal occupations, like there's a shoemaker, one was a shoemaker. But I imagined that that my ancestors had to dust and polish these, the silver, and there was this gilded mirror that the owner said was the largest continuous mirror, longest continuous mirror in colonial America. So I thought, well, also in the house there were, there's lots of artwork of landscapes and maybe horses and the family members and their etchings and silhouettes, but nothing with the black face on it. So I said, black people built that plantation, worked that plantation. 300 black people lived in the Long Green community on that land, but their faces are absent from, the walls of the great house. But I imagined that the mirror, which had begun to de-silver, you know how mirrors start turning black. I looked in the mirror so I could not really see my reflection, but I imagined that I knew the mirrors had seen my people, and the mirrors knew. They saw my people as whole individuals, not as 3/5 of a man, not as property, not as lives, not on the, on the level of livestock. And so that's why I wanted the house and the mirror to speak, because they were eyewitnesses, even though, they couldn't speak. The house was an eyewitness. The mirror was an eyewitness to the history, yeah. The notion of weakness being the reason that we could be robbed of our identity. I guess I challenged that, because it was, it wasn't by chance. It was intentional. That's the way, enslavement was designed. Starting in the Caribbean, where we were broken in, and our names were changed, and we were separated from people who might have spoken the same language, and then we were made to, learn a new tongue, and to be subservient. Everything that we were was beat out of us. And then once we were freed, nobody taught us how to be free. Nobody taught us how to be free, and some of us still don't know how. It takes a lot longer to learn how to be free than it does to learn how to be a slave. And what's happening now with devices, things that we've learned and things that we know, our kids are losing. I heard a speaker, she's in mass communication, she's a professor at Morgan, and I can't think of her name. I wish I could call her name. But she has a book called Spare the Children. It's about corporal punishment and black children. At any rate, she called digital devices weapons of mass distraction. So I think that, there's some of that's intentional too, and the people who, develop the devices and come up with the algorithms don't even let their children use the technology. Yeah, even the word, the naming of a race. There was no race before enslavement. Race was invented so that we could be inferior. They could make us inferior, and they called us black because they classified us the same way they classified horses. So a black horse was negro.
Hmm.
Oh, do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. I got to find it again now. Let me see.
Oh, you had a question?
Yes, it is. Yes, Stacy, yeah. I just met her a couple weeks ago. Yeah, she's brilliant. Yes, yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Ooh,
Yeah.
can I interject?
People would mistake me for her.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Oh, we see
I'm
that.
like her. You know, I'm like Nikki Giovanni when she was in the 70s, or I'm Nikki. You know, I'm Nikki Giovanni if she were taller, and I were smarter. You know.
I had an opportunity to meet her as well, and I wrote for her. I used to write for the Washington Post, and I wrote a story about her that I will always cherish. Yeah, and so I just wanted to bring that because I'm just so very happy that I got to. She came out to Charles County. That's how I got to meet her, and so yeah. She came to Calvert County, and I went out there and interviewed her. And she almost laid me out a couple of times, but it was okay. Temperamental, but it was wonderful. Yeah, so that story is still out there in the ozone. I wanted to, you have a question? Go ahead.
I was wondering, for you, from the beginning of an idea to the writing, to the publishing, and to, I guess, recognition of being published, what was the most difficult part of the process for you?
On my journey, or with one book?
On
my journey. Well, it changed. It has evolved. Initially, was getting my work read by publishers, and the way I got published initially was I knew somebody who knew somebody, and that got me out of the slush pile. It didn't guarantee that after those books were published that another editor would read my work, but I started out with small presses and worked my way up the feeding chain, and I got to mid-sized publishers and then large publishers. And 19 years in, I got an agent. My books had won some awards by that time, and then the agent became my son's agent. So now it's the challenges are different, and one of the challenges, everything that I write does not get published. So that I don't want you to think that everything I write is golden. It's not, and the market changes. Like right now, the picture book market is tight, and you see I write mainly picture books, and so the challenges change from era to era and based on what's going on with the industry.
How do you get this?
Well, I feel like this is what I was born. It's my gift, and this is what I'm supposed to do. And if I do what I'm supposed to do, what God has intended for me to do, if I use my gift, then that's the path of least resistance. I could decide I want to be a dancer, but you're the dancer, yeah. And that might be a little harder, I might have a hard road. It's a harder road as a dancer. It's not my gift, yeah. Oh. Perhaps I would have gotten an agent earlier. But, again, it's in the children's publishing industry at that time, you didn't necessarily have to have an agent. And it was just as hard to get an agent as it was to get a publisher. And there's not that much money in picture books, not in the beginning. So I might not have been attractive to agents initially. Okay. But I would get an agent earlier, and also I wouldn't sign away my performance rights.
Oh my goodness, now she's making me do another writing workshop because we have to, so we talk about that, don't we, in our workshops? And so we will have to talk about that.
All right, so it's a longer poem. It's called My Question for the Looking Glasses. Once my ancestors' reflections were in these mirrors in place of mine. The mirrors saw their wholeness, even if enslavement diminished it. You favor someone, the mirror notes. Looking glasses everywhere at Y. Their number grew from 3 in 1685 to 6 in 1697 to 8 in 1719. Eventually, 2 in the hall chamber, 3 in Henrietta Maria's upstairs quarters, an expensive one painted with gilt designs to match a dresser and tea table, all imitating Chinese lacquered furniture, 1 surrounded by gilded beading, a mahogany one, 2 with gilded frames, a pair of 13-footers, in their day a set of 4 and among the longest continuous mirrors in the land, illuminate the north parlor. The tall looking-glass is now desilvered with age and veiled with dark splotches, brilliance fading like first-hand memories. Those mirrors witness young masters' mischief, gentlemen's agreements, ladies' sewing circles, contrivances, conflicts, and contradictions, flickering candles and gleaming eyes, my ancestors' faces in succession. Seen but not heard at suppers and soirees and unable to turn a blind eye to slavery, the looking-glass remains forever neutral as generations dart past or pose to ponder reflections, each scene as fleeting as the last. Fixed with portraits on the walls, mirrors in the rooms and halls, see the well-dressed off to balls. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest Lloyd of all? Did any dare for fairness call? Mirrors are stuck in reverse. Clocks are better measures. Time will tell. And so the next poem is Timepiece.
Amen.